Hey, what's up guys? Randy Rector here, back at you with another video. And today I'm gonna show you guys a 3-step process to EQ like a pro. Okay, EQs are basically fancy filters that allow us to either boost or cut different frequencies within the audible frequency spectrum. So you can think of it the same way with photography, for instance. You take a picture and then in post you can bring up the blues, cut out the reds, you can change the greens. You have all this control in post, and that's essentially exactly what we're doing with our audio processing. So we have 2 different types of EQs. We have graphic EQs, which you're probably familiar with. These would be in things like your dad's stereo system that he wouldn't let you touch.
Don't go in there.
Don't touch it! TV home theaters, as well as live events and PA systems and stuff like that. And then we have fully parametric EQs, and that's what we're gonna talk about today. Humans can hear as low as 20 hertz right up to 20 kilohertz. And so we can play with any of the frequencies within this range. EQs divide the entire audible spectrum into bands. And now with a graphic EQ, these bands are fixed or pre-assigned. And so the controls that we're limited to are basically boosting or cutting these specific bands. Now parametric EQs have a lot more control. Parametric EQs have 3 main parameters that we're gonna talk about today. The first one is gain. And now gain is basically the exact same as a graphic EQ in that you can boost or cut a specific amount from a specific range. The second knob that we have access to is frequency. And now the frequency knob allows us to sweep that band so that we can find the exact range that we wanna boost or cut. So this is great because we can be a little bit more specific than a graphic EQ with even 32 bands on it, because these bands can go anywhere. They're infinite value basically. And the third parameter that we have is Q or bandwidth. And what this allows us to do is basically determine how steep that boost or cut is. So if it's a really, really tight cut, we call this a notch filter. There are some other tools here like these buttons that allow us to change the shape of the curve. So there's a shelf, which basically means anything above this particular frequency will be boosted. There are bells, which basically means that specific range will be boosted. Okay, now that we know how it all works, let's go over the 3-step process to get you guys EQing like a pro. Step number 1 is remove the junk. And by that I mean, let's remove all the frequencies that we don't need. That way the frequencies that we do want have a little bit more room to shine. So let's use my voice for example here. So my voice will go down as low as about 100 hertz, maybe about 120. So what I'm gonna do is start by putting a high pass filter or a low cut, which is gonna get rid of all that junk down in the low end. This could be the refrigerator, the HVAC system, cars going by outside, a plane overhead. These sort of really low end rumbly sounds live down in this area. So I'm just gonna cut that crap out because we don't need it. And the next thing I'm gonna do is the exact same thing, but on the top end of the spectrum. So I'm gonna add a little bit of a low pass filter just to shave off some of that unwanted highs. There's not much information in my voice above about 15, 16 kilohertz. So I'm gonna put a slight roll off up at the top end as well. Again, these steps are really gonna help the stuff that we do want to shine through. Step number 2 is I'm gonna find some of the resonant, unwanted frequencies in my voice that may be a bit unappealing or a bit unflattering. And I wanna cut those out and then make a little bit more room for the, I guess, good frequencies to shine through. You'll notice step 1 and step 2 are both cutting, and that's one of the first rules of EQing is always cut before boosting, because you get a much more pleasing, higher fidelity audio signal. So let's say you want to do a phone sound where it's just, just the mid-range. You can actually accomplish the same thing as boosting the mid-range by cutting out the low and cutting out the high. So all that's left is mids. It's essentially the same thing, and generally speaking, you'll get higher fidelity in your audio. So to find these nasty ranges, what I'm gonna do is sharpen the Q or the bandwidth slightly. And what I'm gonna do is actually start by boosting, because it's easier to find the unwanted frequencies by boosting them rather than trying to subtract them and find where they are by subtraction. If you add to it, and then you start sweeping these frequencies around, you should start to hear some honky frequencies or things that just don't sound quite as pleasing. And then once you're done sweeping around, then you can actually remove them. And once they're removed, you should have a much better audio signal. And now I can actually do that again if there's another frequency that I don't like. Maybe there's something bouncing around in my room that I find where there's, a bit of unwanted reverberations in my room. I can actually use this exact same process to eliminate those resonant frequencies caused by the shape of the room, which will give you a much better, way easier to listen to audio file. That's one of the important things about EQing like this is we're actually making it so the voice is easier to listen to. It's slightly more pleasing, meaning I can make a longer video, keep your attention longer without your ears getting as fatigued or kind of annoyed. Not to say that my voice isn't annoying, but definitely notching these filters out will help make it a little bit more pleasing to listen to. Depending on the audio file that I'm working with or how well it was recorded, I may do this 3 or 4 times to find all those frequencies that I don't like and remove them. And a little insider tip here, if you find a frequency that you really don't like and it starts to sound a bit unnatural because you're cutting out too much, you can actually accomplish a similar thing by cutting out a little bit of that and then doubling the frequency that you're at and cutting out a little bit there too. The reason being is every fundamental tends to have harmonics that are an octave above or a doubling of frequency above that. So if you make 2 small notches as opposed to 1 gigantic one, you'll probably get a really transparent result. And the third and final step in EQing like a pro is to boost or sweeten certain ranges. So in my voice, what I tend to like to do for YouTube videos and stuff like this is just boosting a little bit of top end. And it's just gonna give it a bit more of sort of a professional production edge. You see this in music all the time too, like pop vocals have just a ton of top end on them. I won't go quite that far for this type of video, but generally speaking, a little boost up around 5, 6K will really help that sort of energetic intelligibility come through. So it'll sound a bit more crispy, a bit more like I'm right beside you, and a little less muffled. Now you're gonna wanna do a little bit more of this if you're using a dynamic microphone. So like a Shure SM7B or a Electro Voice RE20, like the broadcast microphones, you're gonna wanna boost a little bit more top end just to make it nice and crispy. Sometimes I may even boost a little bit down on the lower end just to sweeten it. I'm using a Rode NTG3, which has a pretty nice low end to it, so I don't feel like I need to do it too much, but you can always play with these to your taste and see what works best for your voice. I am willing to promise you that if you use this 3-step process, cut out the junk, cut out the resonant frequencies, and then boost to sweeten, that you'll have great results with your recording. But it's really important that you make sure you use your ears and you practice this a lot, because EQing really well takes a lot of experience. It takes a lot of experience recording different instruments in different locations, even like your voice, how it sounds in this room versus how it sounds outside or in a car. It's gonna be a totally different experience. So make sure that you're using your ears and listening for those problem areas and just sweetening what sounds good. Bottom line is, trust your ears. I think you've got it. We'll see you guys in the next one.